This caused a lot of stress and anxiety, but often enough to really bother me. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to the following. My bedroom door would slowly creak open, and a member of my family would come into my room. Sometimes my mom, sometimes my stepdad, sometimes it was me. They'd almost tiptoe into my room like a cartoon villain about to commit some tomfoolery. This was scary to my 8-year-old brain. After entering and looking at me for a moment, I'd usually try to engage with them, like asking why they were in my room, or asking them to leave once I knew they weren't my real family. Once I engaged with them, they always said the same thing, in the same weirdly predatory voice, like they were trying to comfort me. But it was a grown male voice, coming from my mom's, sister, or me. The voice didn't match my stepdad either. They always said, "Happy Warm," but with emphasis on warm, like they were wishing it upon me. Then I'd feel a blast of heat, but it never felt comforting. My mind always interpreted it as feeling the fires of hell for a moment, because I thought these might have been demons. My mom and I laid down some salt lines in my room and burned some sage after I finally had the courage to tell her about this. The events stopped when we did this.
I once had a dream I was walking solo down a familiar dirt path towards a wooded area. Side note, the path felt familiar to me in the dream. I had never been down this path before. As I walked toward the wooded area, the feeling of familiarity changed and the path ended at an old abandoned cemetery under the tree canopy. The familiarity suggested the path continued and the cemetery should not be there. I was drawn into the cemetery toward a specific grave. The detail was vivid. There was an old stone bench next to a sunken grave. The headstone had an angel on top. The remaining wing had a pine needle dangling off, hanging from a cobweb, drifting in the breeze. It was peaceful and quiet. I immediately woke up and felt like the dream was calling me back. I felt oddly connected. The jolt from waking up was so startling I decided to write the dream down. Fast forward a couple of years, I was considering buying a house with my girlfriend. After we reached a house we were considering, the realtor called and said she was running late. While waiting, we walked the outside of the house. Behind the house we noticed a path past the overgrown grass going into some woods. To kill time, we decided to walk the path to the trees. While walking along and enjoying the sun on my face, I was hit with an intense feeling of déjà vu. I knew this place. As we reached the woods, there it was, the abandoned cemetery. It was the same cemetery in my dream. I told my girlfriend I'd visited this place in a dream and described specific details down to the pine needle. She thought I was trying to pull a stupid prank until she saw the sunken grave, missing wing and stone bench, and even the pine needle hanging off the angel's wing. She immediately walked back toward our car. The entire experience was a copy-paste of my dream with the exception of my girlfriend being present. Later that day, we were back at my house. She asked me how I knew all that detail. I let her read the dream I wrote down. I described the path, trees, cemetery, and weather perfectly. She refused to ever talk about the experience again. That was around 20 years ago. The experience still haunts me to this day.
Backstory. When my father was a child, he would see things. 2 examples. Once he saw Toucan Sam peeking around his bedroom door. And another time, he got on his tiptoes and was looking out the window. And he said he saw the Cookie Monster sitting in a dark hole, and when he looked at it, it turned around and opened its mouth, like a puppet would. In all these encounters, what he saw had solid black eyes. He had these sorts of encounters throughout his childhood and teen years, many also encountered by others at the same time. But that is the backstory for this. The place where this happened was in deep backwoods Kentucky. Such a small rural place it couldn't even be called a town. In the mid-90s when this story happened, everyone out there still had outhouses. So anyway, it was the mid-90s and my younger sister was a toddler, just at the age of talking. She was much younger than my older sister and I, about 7 and 9 years younger. Our father had told my older sister and I the Cookie Monster story, but of course not my little sister. We had went out to visit one of my father's childhood friends who lived out there still. Sisters and I had never been before. We stayed late and left after dark, and were navigating down an old dirt road and my little sister was fast asleep in her car seat. We crossed this small concrete bridge and just as we did, my little sister woke up and said, "The Cookie Monster is dead," and fell right back to sleep. Now I have to say we were more of a cartoon household and less of a puppet household, so I never even remember her watching Sesame Street. But even if she did, it was very weird timing and a strange thing for a toddler to say. Never said anything about the Cookie Monster or death before or after that. We were all freaked out the rest of the night and it still gives me chills 3 decades later.
I saw a creature, and years later, my sister did too. When I was about 5, I Was sleeping in my bed, and I wake up and see what I can only describe as a lizard person standing at the end of my bed. He had the height and body of a man, like bipedal, arms and legs ect. Dark green with fine smooth scales like a snake and with pupils split like a cat. His legs are spread shoulders width, apart, and his arms are held out to his side like a T. Think the Vitruvian Man pose. He smiles and stares at me, and I close my eyes. When I open them, he's gone. Fast forward about 20 years. I'm 25, and my youngest sister, who is 7 years younger than me and wasn't alive at the time of the event, is visiting my place. We are telling ghost stories, and I ask her if she's ever seen anything strange. She thought for a minute, and said that once, when she was about 5, she woke up in the middle of the night to see the figure of a person standing in front of her window, legs shoulders width apart and arms out like a T. It was standing in front of a window, so it was backlit and appeared just as a shadow. She ducked her head under the covers, and when she looked again, he was gone. Now her event happened in a totally different state over a decade after my encounter. She was so much younger than me that I cannot imagine I'd ever told her my story as kids or anything, nor did she remember me telling her my story. I have no idea what happened, but the distinctive pose is so unusual.
I worked in a men's prison that was built in 1848. Every 16 weeks or so, staff were required to work a week on night 7, 12-hour shifts followed by a whole week off. Some staff would outright refuse to do nights and trade their shifts. I would often pick up night shifts as they were fairly easy. You'd sit in an office watching Netflix, keeping an eye on the cameras and doing safety checks at regular intervals, and could then use the week off to relax, work overtime on a really good hourly rate, or have a last-minute holiday. Growing up, I'd always believed in the paranormal due to having very open-minded parents who were believers in the paranormal, and through having my own experiences, so I weren't really fazed at the potential of paranormal encounters. In the 2 years I worked there, I had many paranormal experiences, but the one that always stands out to me is this one. I would start at about 9 p.m. and would be locked on a wing without keys, where I wouldn't be unlocked until the morning. Oftentimes by 9:30 p.m., I would see anomalies on the security cameras, and the motion sensors would often pick up on things that weren't visible on the camera. This was a common occurrence, and often persisted regularly throughout the whole night. One night I'd been watching the cameras for hours. It was about 3 a.m., and I hadn't seen a single thing on the camera. Jokingly, I said aloud, "Is no one going to say hello to me tonight?" As I was finishing my coffee, before doing my round of safety checks, I left the office and walked up to the 3rd floor of the wing to do a safety check. When I heard a soft-spoken female voice say hello to me, I turned around expecting to see a night nurse doing her rounds, but there was nobody there. I'm not often freaked out by this kind of stuff. As stated earlier, I had many experiences while there, including full-bodied apparitions of spirits I was later able to identify, being touched and pushed, disembodied voices, footsteps without a source, and seeing electronic items function without intact wiring or a power source. But that one by far freaked me out the most. It was an intelligent response, and I got exactly what I asked for.
Probably pales in comparison to a lot of stories on here, but this happened just over a year ago. I'd moved out of my family home into a flat closer to the center of the city I live in. It was a relatively boring night, so I decided to take the dog on his walk. I'd gone up to our usual walking spot, which was a path adjacent to a park that overlooked the city center, so it was lit enough that I could see where I was going due to all the lights from the city. There were no light sources on the path itself, so seeing more than 20 feet was a bit difficult. The dog all of a sudden stopped dead in his tracks and stared straight forward. This isn't like him. Usually nothing phases him on walks. I was trying to focus on what he was staring at, and to this day, have no explanation for what I saw. Around 20-30 feet away, I could see the silhouette, a man facing away from the city center lights into a patch of woodland. And next to him I could see the silhouette of a huge black mass. Like a sort of mound. It must have been 6 feet across and about 4 or 5 feet tall. But what scared me the most was the mound was moving, almost like it was breathing, moving up and down almost methodically and swaying slightly from side to side at its highest point. I was maybe halfway down the path at this point, and it was half a mile either way to get back a main road. I had my eyes trained on what I was seeing for about 10-15 seconds, and the man never moved, never paid any attention to my presence. He stayed completely still, facing away from whatever the mass was. My dog turned around and walked the complete opposite way, again very unlike him. He usually wants to play with anything that remotely looks like a person, and I followed quickly. I'd have taken a video of what it was, but I didn't want a man to then notice and flip out. The half-mile walk back had me looking back over my shoulder the whole way, hoping that whatever I saw wasn't following. I went back up there a few more times in the daytime and never saw anything like that again.